I want to start by saying something clearly. I am not a superstitious person. I do not believe in ghosts. I do not believe in curses. I believe in facts, in evidence, in things I can see and touch and explain. Or I used to tell my name is Marcus Hale. I am a freelance urban photographer and documentarian, and what I am about to tell you happened 14 months ago in a place called Ashford Memorial Hospital, a place that closed in 1987, a place no one was supposed to still be inside. I have told this story to exactly 3 people before today. My sister, a therapist, I stopped seeing after the second session, a police detective who told me off the record that he believed me but could not do anything about it today. I am telling you because someone needs to know, someone needs to understand what is still happening inside that building, and maybe, just maybe, one of you can do something I could not. It started with an email, simple, professional, nothing unusual about it on the surface. The subject line read, Documentary Project Ashford Memorial Generous Compensation. I almost deleted. I did get a lot of spam, a lot of fake gigs, but something made me open it. The email was from a company called Voss Heritage Documentation Group. They described themselves as a historical preservation agency hired by the city to document condemned buildings before demolition. Ashford Memorial Hospital was scheduled to be torn down in 60 days. They needed a photographer and documentarian to spend 5 nights inside, capturing everything, every room, every hallway. Detail the pay was $12,000 for 5 nights. I know what you are thinking. That is too much money for a simple job. That is the kind of pay that should make you suspicious, and you are right, but at the time I was 3 months behind on rent. My car needed a new transmission, and my last 3 clients had disappeared without paying me $12,000. Felt like a lifeline, so I said yes. They sent me a contract the next day, standard stuff, or so it seemed, non-disclosure agreement, liability waiver, equipment list, but buried on page 7 in small gray text that was almost invisible was a single clause that I did not fully understand until later. It read, Documentarian acknowledges that Ashford Memorial Hospital may contain individuals classified under Section 9C of the Heritage Preservation Act. These individuals are not to be photographed, engaged with, or disturbed in any capacity. If encountered, documentarian must immediately vacate the area and report to the project supervisor. I read it twice, then I told myself it was probably legal language for squatters, homeless people who might be living inside. I signed the contract. I should not have signed that contract. I arrived at Ashford Memorial on a Tuesday evening in October. The building sat at the end of a long, cracked road surrounded by dead trees and a rusted chain-link fence. It was massive, 7 stories tall, red brick that had turned almost black from decades of weather and neglect. Most of the windows were boarded up, but some were not, and as I stood outside looking up, I saw something in one of the 3rd-floor windows, a shape just for a second there, and then gone. I told myself it was a curtain or a shadow. My eyes playing tricks. After a 3-hour drive, a man named Gerald met me at the entrance. He was the project supervisor, 50s, gray jacket, clipboard, tired eyes. He did not smile when he shook my hand. He gave me a key card, a radio, and a folder of floor plans. He showed me where I would be sleeping, a small room on the ground floor that had once been an administrative office. They had set up a cot, a space heater, and a folding table. Then he walked me to the main entrance and stopped. There are rules, he said. I told him I had read the contract. He shook his head slowly. not the contract rules, my rules. He held up one finger. Rule 1. You do not go above the 4th floor ever. 2 fingers. Rule 2. If you hear sounds coming from the upper floors, and you ignore them. You do not investigate. You do not call out. 3 fingers. Rule 3. If you see anyone in this building who is not me, you leave the room immediately. You radio me. You do not speak to them. You do not make eye contact. He lowered his hand and looked at me very seriously. Do you understand these rules, Mr. Hale? I said yes. He nodded once, got in his car, and drove away, leaving me completely alone. The front doors of Ashford Memorial Hospital opened with a long grinding sound, and the darkness inside swallowed the evening light whole. The inside of Ashford Memorial smelled like time itself had rotted, dust, mold, old antiseptic, and something underneath all of it that I could not identify, something almost sweet, the wrong kind of sweet. My flashlight cut through the darkness as I moved through the main lobby. Overturned chairs, I collapsed. Reception desk, old patient files scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. I started documenting immediately. That is how I cope with fear. I work. If my camera is up, my brain is focused. I am not scared. I am professional. The ground floor took me about 2 hours. Waiting rooms, administrative offices, a small chapel. Chapel still had candles on the altar, melted down to nothing, but recently lit. The wax was still soft. I told myself, Gerald must have come in earlier, maybe, to check on something. I moved to the second floor. The second floor was a long, wide hallway, patient rooms on both sides, 32 rooms in total. Documented each one. Most were empty, stripped of everything: beds, equipment, curtains. But room 214 was different. The bed was still there, made up with sheets, old, yellowed, but neatly arranged. A chair was pulled up beside it, and on the small bedside table, a glass of water. I stood in the doorway for a very long time. The water was clear, no dust floating in it, no film on the surface. Fresh. Someone had put that water there recently. My hand was shaking slightly. As I raised my camera, I took 12 photographs of that room. Then from directly above me, footsteps, slow, heavy, deliberate. One step, then another, moving down the hallway above me, the 3rd floor in the same direction I was walking, matching my pace. Step for step, I stopped walking. The footsteps stopped. I took 1 step forward. Footsteps above me, took 1 step forward. I radioed Gerald. Static. Then his voice, flat and unsurprised. Ignore it. Document and move only. Asked him what was up there. A long pause on his end. Then, nothing that concerns you tonight. The radio clicked off. He stood in that hallway for 4 full minutes. Then I went back to my ground floor room, locked the door, and did not sleep until dawn. The second day I explored, and daylight, sunlight changed everything. The building felt less alive, somehow less aware. Made it through the 3rd floor without incident. More empty rooms, a collapsed nurse's station, a children's ward that made my chest hurt. Tiny beds, faded murals on the walls, cartoon animals that had been painted with such care, such hope, now peeling and gray. I found something in the children's ward that I did not photograph. A teddy bear sitting upright in the corner of one room, clean, no dust on it, brand new looking. I left it exactly where it was, and I left that room very quickly. Night 2 began quietly. I had set up additional lights in the main hallway, work lamps on stands. It helped. Light always does. I was documenting the 2nd floor again, when I heard it, not footsteps this time, a voice very faint coming from the end of the hallway room. 231. Last room before the stairwell, a voice that sounded like an old woman humming, a slow, tuneless hum that rose and fell like breathing every hair on my body stood up. I remembered Gerald's rules. Do not engage, do not make eye contact radio. And Levi raised the radio, and then the humming stopped, and a voice clear, sharp, completely calm, said, "I know you are there, young Manny, can see your light under the door. I did not move you or the new one." The voice said, calm, most conversational. "They send a new one every few years to take pictures, to document a pause. They never tell you the truth, do they?" My hand holding the radio was completely still. I could not make myself press the button. "Come," and the voice said, "I will not hurt you. I have been here a very long time, and I am so very tired of being alone. God help me." Reached out, and I opened the door. What I found inside that room changed everything I thought I knew about this place, about why I was really hired, about what Voss Heritage Documentation Group actually is, about the woman sitting in that wheelchair who had been dead for 3 years. Part 2 continues the full account, everything that happened. On nights 3, 4, and 5, what I saw on the floors I was told never to visit, and what is still happening inside Ashford Memorial right now as you listen to this. In Part 1, I told you about the job, about Ashford Memorial Hospital, about Gerald and his rules, about the footsteps on the 3rd floor that matched my every step, and about the voice, the old woman's voice coming from room 231 at the end of the 2nd floor hallway. She said she knew I was there. She said she was tired of being alone, and I against every rule. I had been given open the door. This is what happened next. She was sitting in a wheelchair by the window, old, impossibly old, it seemed, white hair, paper thin skin, hospital gown, the old kind pale blue with faded stripes. She turned to look at me when I entered. Her eyes were sharp, alert, completely present. "Sit down," she said, nodding to a chair that I had not noticed before. It was positioned as if it had been waiting for me. Sat. "What is your name?" she asked. I told her Marcus. She nodded slowly. "Marcus, good name, strong name." She looked back at the window. There was nothing to see. It was boarded up. She was staring at the boards as if she could see straight through them. "My name is Eleanor Voss," she said. I recognized the name immediately. Voss, as in Voss Heritage Documentation Group, the company that had hired me. Smiled when she saw my expression. "Yes," she said quietly, "my family owns this building, has owned it for a very long time." She folded her hands in her lap. "We closed it officially in 1987. But closing a building and emptying it, those are 2 very different things." I asked her what she meant. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "This hospital did terrible things, Marcus, for a very long time, and the people it was done to, some of them never left." I asked her if she meant their bodies. She shook her head. "I mean them," she said simply. "They are still here, still in their rooms, still waiting." I asked, "Waiting for what?" She turned to look at me fully. Her eyes were calm and sad and absolutely serious. "To be acknowledged," she said, "to be seen, to have someone finally say, 'We know what happened to you. We know you were here, and we are sorry. That is why my family sends documentarians.' She said, 'Every few years we hope that if someone records it all, sees everything, maybe it will be enough. Maybe they can finally rest.'" She looked back at the boards over the window. "It has not worked yet. Spent 3 hours with Eleanor that night. She told me about the hospital's history, about the patients who had been kept here against their will in the 1940s and 50s, about experimental treatments, about isolation wards, about doctors who believed they were helping, and ones who knew they were not and did not care. She told me about a locked wing on the 6th floor, a wing she called the quiet ward. That is where they put the ones who would not stop screaming, she said quietly. They called it the quiet ward because once you went in you were quiet. She told me about the rules Gerald had given me and why the 4th floor was the limit. Above the 4th floor, she said, they are more present. Boundary between then and now is thinner up there. Things that happened in those rooms, they happen again on a loop forever. I sat with that for a moment. Then I asked her the question I had been building toward since I first sat down. Eleanor, when did you last leave this room? A long silence. She looked at her hands in her lap. I do not remember, she said softly. Another silence. I do not think I can. I went back to my room that night with my head full of her words, and I made a decision. I know it was against the rules. I know it was dangerous. Every part of me that was still rational understood that, but Eleanor's words stayed with me, to be seen, to be acknowledged. If something real was happening in this building, something that needed to be witnessed, then maybe my camera was exactly what was needed. On night 3, I went above the 4th floor. The 5th floor was different. The moment I stepped off the stairwell, the air was colder by at least 10 degrees. My breath fogged in front of my face. The hallway layout was identical to the floors below, but everything here felt frozen differently. The floors below looked abandoned. This floor looked interrupted. Meal trays still sitting on trolleys in the hallway, nurse's station with papers mid-sorted, and a pen lying on top, as if just set down. A medication cart, half-stocked, with the drawer left open. If everyone had simply stopped mid-moment and never resumed, and I moved slowly, camera recording audio. Running room 501, empty room 502, empty room 503. I stopped through the small window in the door. There was light inside. Not my light, not a flashlight, soft, warm, yellowish kind of light from an old bulb. I pressed my face to the glass. There was a man in the bed, old, thin eyes, closed blanket pulled up to his chest, hands folded neatly, and beside him a nurse in a uniform from the 1950s, white dress, white cap, white shoes. She was adjusting his blanket gently, carefully, with complete focus, as if he was still alive, as if this was any normal night in any normal hospital. I raised my camera. The nurse stopped moving. She turned her head slowly and looked directly at the window, directly at me. Her face was calm, expressionless, but her eyes were completely black. No white, no iris, no pupil, just black. And she stared at me for what felt like forever. And then she turned back to the patient and continued adjusting his blanket, as if I had never been there. At Alley, do not fully remember going to the 6th floor. I know how that sounds, but it is the truth. My memory of that night has gaps in it. Certain moments simply removed, like pages torn from a book. I remember the nurse in room 503, and then I remember standing in front of a door on the 6th floor marked clearly quiet, ward authorized personnel only. The padlock on the door was open, hanging loose from the latch, as if someone had just unlocked it, as if someone had wanted me to come in. The quiet ward was a long, narrow hallway, with rooms on only one side, 12 rooms. Each door had a small sliding panel at eye level. Kind used to observe patients without entering. Every panel was closed. I walked slowly down the hallway. At room 4, I stopped, because under the door there was shadow moving, not light shadow, as if something inside was moving between light sources blocking and unblocking, something casting a shifting, breathing shadow under the door, but there were no lights. In these rooms there should have been no shadow, and Allie stood there for a very long time. My hand would not reach for the door handle, my body simply refused. And then very quietly, something on the other side of the door slid the panel open from the inside. I looked through, and something looked back. I cannot describe what I saw accurately. I have tried. I have written it down and deleted it 17 times. I have told my therapist and watched her face go very still. What I will say is this: it was not a ghost, not a monster, not anything. I have a word for it. Was something that had been in that room for a very, very long time, long enough that the room had shaped itself around it, long enough that it had become part of the walls, part of the air, part of the darkness. In that space, and it recognized me not as Marcus Holley, the documentarian, not as a trespasser. It recognized something underneath all of that, something fundamental, something that exists in every person who has ever stood at the edge of a darkness they do not understand and chosen to look anyway. And in that moment I understood something that I cannot unlearn, that some places hold things not because of magic or the supernatural, but because of what was done there, because suffering, when it is deep enough and long enough, leaves a mark on the world that does not fade. It only waits for someone to finally see. I'd finished my 5 nights. I still do not fully understand why. Maybe because I needed the money, maybe because leaving felt like abandoning something that had trusted me, maybe because Eleanor had asked me in that quiet, tired voice to please finish what I started. Nights 4 and 5 were different, quieter. If the building had shown me what it needed to show me and was now simply letting me work, I documented everything I was allowed to document, every room on every permitted floor, every detail I could capture. I did not go above the 4th floor again, not because I was following the rules, but because I understood now why the rules existed. Some doors once opened changed the person who opened them, and I had already changed enough on my last morning. Gerald arrived to collect my equipment. He reviewed my footage without expression. His face told me nothing. He signed my payment form, handed me an envelope. As I loaded my car, I stopped and turned to him. What happens to all of this footage? I asked. He paused. It is archived, he said, preserved. I asked if anyone ever watched. I've looked at me steadily. The right people do. He said. I asked about Eleanor something. Crossed his face then, just for a fraction of a second there, and then controlled. Mrs. Voss passed away in 2019. He said quietly. 3 years before you were hired. I stood very still. That is not possible. I said. I spoke with her for 3 hours across 2 nights. She told me about the hospital, about her family, about the patients in the quiet. Ward, I know what she told you, Gerald said. He picked up his clipboard. She tells everyone the same things. Walked toward his car, got and started the engine, and before he drove away, he rolled down his window. You did good work in there, Mr. Hale, better than most. He paused. She liked you, I could tell. He drove away. I stood in the parking lot until his car disappeared around the bend. Then I looked up at the building, 3rd floor, 2nd window from the left, a figure standing perfectly still, watching me leave. I got in my car. I drove away without looking back. I went home. I processed all 47 hours of footage. Most of it was exactly what you would expect: empty rooms, peeling walls, broken furniture, dust. But on the footage from the 5th floor, from the hallway outside room 503, You can see the light, the warm yellowish light, coming from inside a room that has had no working electricity since 1987, and if you look very carefully in the small reflection on the glass panel of the door, you can see her, the nurse, adjusting the blanket, tanned, then turning to look at the camera. I have watched that clip over 400 times. I showed it to a police detective. He watched it, twice said nothing. For a long time then he said, I have had 2 other reports from that building over the past 15 years, both from documentarians hired by the same company, both describing the same nurse, same room, same moment. Turning to look at the camera, he set down the laptop very carefully. We do not know what to do with that information, Mr. Hale, so we do nothing. Ashford Memorial Hospital was not demolished. The 60-day demolition window came and went. The city cited structural complications, then funding issues, then a heritage preservation review that is apparently still ongoing. The building is still standing. Voss Heritage Documentation Group is still sending people inside, and Eleanor Voss, who died in February of 2019, is still sitting in her wheelchair in room 231, still staring at the boards over the window, still waiting. I think about what she said almost every day, to be seen, to be acknowledged, to have someone finally say, we know what happened to you. We know you were here and we are sorry. So if you are listening, if any part of what happened in that place still exists somewhere between the walls of Ashford Memorial, I see you. I know what was done to you. I know you were there, and I am sorry.